Hello everyone, this is Pete, aka DHG Forever Praising, aka Prominent Jester. I'm currently in my third year of college, second year computer science. I have 3 kids, 2 baby mamas, and I had to put the kids in a home because I couldn't take care of them.
Really, nigga?
Alright, now that I got the lying out the way, let's move on to today's topic, video games.
Please be advised that no video games were harmed in the making of this film. No food or drink during the presentation. Enjoy your time.
The gaming industry has boomed exponentially since its dawning, and many positives have come out of its success. The main goal has always been, how do I entertain, as well as excite people. Recently this hasn't been the case though for the gaming industry. Underneath all of its fluff of technology and beautiful cinematics, they've definitely dwindled in their commitment to the customer. I'm not going to be able to cover every issue that the gaming industry has, and video games for that matter, but I will do my best to cover all of them. So without further ado, let's get to the technological issues. Technology is basically the Flash, speeding by generation after generation with something new and improved that astonishes the masses, starting with the first ever game created in 1958. It was just a small table tennis game on an oscilloscope. Now we have major gaming companies such as Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft at the forefront of innovation. We even have virtual reality capabilities, and all it took was 50 or so years to get here. Although this seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Sony came out with their PlayStation 1 in 1994, followed by Microsoft's Xbox in 2004. Here's where the first technological issue arises. Microsoft decides to start updating their console at lightning speeds. To meet that demand and innovation and profit for their company, Sony does the same thing, fueling this never-ending console war between Microsoft and Sony. Now they're both at their 4th generation of consoles. What happens to the consoles before this one? They're basically useless now due to a want for the next big thing. Some people can't afford the new thing, so many stay on the old console. Especially with online multiplayer games, finding matches on older consoles and games become very difficult, which causes a major break in the communities that play a certain game. Thus brings the question.
Question time.
Should the gaming industry tone down their innovation in order to promote positive online communities, or continue on the path they have set in motion? Now, moving on to the next big technological issue. Now, nothing beats a brand new trailer or teaser.
That's right! Get those folks!
Well, back to what I was saying. Now, nothing beats a brand new trailer or teaser for a new video game, Infinite Warfare. The betas for these games provide amazing graphics and smoothness that are above average. The issue comes when the final product isn't always what the gamer expects. Infinite Warfare. Failed graphics to compensate for other areas, interface issues, and the occasional glitch is enough to drive anyone insane. So what do these gamers do? They either quit the franchise, or they revert back to the older games of that franchise. I had the same issue with Halo, the Master Chief Collection. I had just started college. Halo MCC was coming out and was regarded as the Halo of all Halos, combining all 4 of the Halo games into one disc. The idea was amazing, however execution was terrible. Constant lagging out of lobbies, game chat issues, you name it, Halo MCC had the issue prepped and ready for you to rage to. I didn't touch the game after only a week of playing. So here comes the question.
Question time.
What are the reasons for companies not being prepared to handle large amounts of gamers on their servers? Should they have pushed back release date to allow the possibility of better quality after all of the unnecessary hype? I don't understand transitions, so here's a picture of a unicorn. Now we're on to the social issues. The gaming industry has had an enormous impact on society, raking in $23.5 billion in 2015 alone, according to the Entertainment Software Association, with $16.5 billion of it in software sales, which includes just the digital downloads of video games, mobile game apps, and the like. Relating this to education, you could assume that our priorities lie more closely with our entertainment as opposed to our education. Many studies have been done on how video games have impacted the duration of time that students spend playing games rather than time spent studying. World of Warcraft was accused by the FCC of leading many college students to even drop out. A study on adolescents between 10 and 19 years of age that played video games in the US showed that kids who played video games spent 30% less time reading and 34% less time doing homework. There's one particular detail that the study fails to explain though, which is what genre of game these children were playing. A survey done by Aaron Hastings had 70 schoolboys from 6 to 10 years old monitored by their parents based on their usage of video games and academic performance. Children that played a lot could be easily linked to low school competence, but that was only for violent video games. Children that played more education-oriented video games showed progress in their academics, not only in GPA, but in their pro-social behavior, or the assisting of others. The other side of this coin is in fact the violent video game studies. Violent video games contribute to increased levels of aggression and social isolation. The stereotype of a nerdy guy with glasses playing games all day is many times true. Many times there are those that acquire an addiction to video games, distancing themselves far from social contact and anything going on outside of their little world. This addiction is enough to end marriages, friendships, and many other relationships that have ended because of the choice to continue in a virtual world rather than spend time with people who are closest to them. Most conversations from addicts are about a new game they haven't been able to put down, completely disregarding any talk of world events or national news. My brother has this problem, and with your small donation of $5 a week, there might be a way to cure his disease. No, but seriously, it is a large issue that many don't know how to deal with and can consume a person entirely. Now on to our second social issue. Video games are considered a form of free speech. One issue with this stands out and involves gender. Women have been portrayed in many games as the prostitute or sex object. Meanwhile, the male is considered the overreigning hero of the entire story.
Question time.
Do we have an obligation to restrict this form of speech if it degrades women so much? Are there video games being sold to appeal to the masses as opposed to adhering to equality of gender within the game? Is the video game industry shutting off women completely, knowing that only 7 to 8% of employees in the video game industry are women? A study done in 1998 examined 33 games of the time and found that no female characters were included in 41% of the games with characters. Women were portrayed as sex objects in 28% of the 33 video games being studied. These percentages have only skyrocketed in today's video games. In 2005, a study was done that took sales data from a research firm for 9 major game systems sold in that year. This sample took the top 150 games evenly across all platforms. I'm not going to give you all of the percentages, boring blah blah blah, so I'll just cut it simple. The results presented the conclusion that males are definitely more of a choice for character roles than women, even more so with primary roles, leaving just the secondary roles for women if they even incorporate women as a secondary role. To answer if video games are sold to appeal to the masses, that is exactly true. When your consumer base is made of 70% male and profit is what you seek, appealing to the larger consumer crowd is key. The majority seem to want sexy, attractive, and dumb women. Meanwhile, there are leaps towards shifting this tradition. Mirror's Edge series depicts a very beautiful, smart, and kick-ass type of woman whose athleticism rivals every male character in the game. Go women! Here's another unicorn. Time for Ethics Class 101. Understanding the difference between right and wrong is a fundamental concept that is taught to us at a very young age, or at least should be. The real question is, how do we decide on these ethical decisions?
Question time.
So who sets the standard, and what is considered the norm? I guess the answer to that would be to look at any superhero movie that depicts a protagonist and antagonist. The good choice involves the betterment of collective society, whereas the bad choice would be an action that collectively many feel is a questionable act, seeming wrong. Our first issue comes with a nasty phrase known as crunch time. It basically deals with a large amount of unpaid overtime for video game designers and programmers. How does such an evil nightmare exist, you ask? Well, let's assume you're the head of an independent video game developing company. That's right, big shot. Work weeks are the standard 40 hours per week. Your team meets the deadlines and things are running pretty smooth. Then you get a call from your publisher saying everything your team did sucks, redo it. Now you have 4 options as the head of everything. Number 1, ask for more money and time. 2, to cut other features out of the game in order to help meet your deadline. 3, tell him you can't do it. Or 4, crunch time. Now of course as the owner, it's a miracle for the first 3 to work. where normally the entire project is shut down. So crunch time it is. Now your employees have to spend 70 to 100 hours per week to finish this game, all unpaid overtime, by the way. So, this raises the ethical question.
Question time.
Is it ethical to require your employees to endure long work weeks for something that might not even be what the publisher wants? Here's your answer. These companies don't care. There's a deadline and money's to be made. Is it worth making employees crunch in the first place? Well, one side says that it does nothing to benefit the final product. All it creates are physical and mental issues for the employees that spend 16 hours a day completing assignments. They can't fully focus, small mistakes are made causing them to redo steps many times, and the outcome is less than satisfactory. There are horror stories of employees sleeping in the office and binge producing over 30 hours straight, just to create a small portion of the game. And there are those that are for crunch time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they agree that crunch time is any way beneficial to the employees in their physical and mental state. The reasoning for crunch time is that more often than not, the product is successful and the reviews on the game soften the horrible beatdown you just took to make it. It's the end result that determines whether crunch time was worth it. Not many managers and heads of departments want to ethically approach this topic. Due dates are king though, and if these companies want to make a hefty profit, they're gonna do it. Gaming companies are changing up the way their games are being played now. Companies such as Ubisoft and Pop Games implemented this pay-to-play concept with microtransactions. You basically spend money in a game to enhance abilities and get items that you couldn't get otherwise. This ultimately gives you the advantage over other gamers who don't purchase the extra content. It's fine if the game is free with microtransactions. The issue comes when $60 games have these unfair extras that boost only those that pay for it. Gamers don't enjoy having to spend extra money to become good at a game. Options become limited and content falls short because of microtransactions. Of course, those that make money don't complain nearly as much if it means they can spend hundreds of dollars on getting them to the top. Not all added content is considered as ridiculous, however. Many violent first-person shooters are constantly releasing downloadable content that provides new maps and customizable capabilities that add no value to how well one can play. Just makes you look cooler. Here comes the final ethical issue. This one will be a little more extensive due to its popularity within the video game community. I've been around video games nearly all of my life, and the one thing I find is most recurrent is that violent video games are mostly, if not always, any weapon-based game. Two genre-setting video games were released in 1999, Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, which I got to play both, which recently had a makeover release for Doom. That same year, the Columbine High School massacre took place in Jefferson County, where 13 people were murdered. The two shooters were two teenage boys that attended this school. They were later found to have an affinity for weapon-based shooter games, specifically Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. Grand Theft Auto and its many sequels have been labeled obscene by exposing blocked yet accessible sexual content to children. Do you see the pattern that I'm setting here yet? Violent video games are blamed for school shootings, rises in bullying and aggression, and in violence. Many agree that they desensitize children to violence and teach them that violence is acceptable when resolving conflict. Thus raises the ethical question.
Question time.
How are these games being regulated? Are they done so in an ethical manner that protects children of certain ages from obscene and explicit content? Are video game companies willing to adjust their freedom of speech to meet the security necessary for our nation's and even world's youth? Let's find out. The video game industry voluntarily created its own regulatory system so as not to avoid federal interference. The Entertainment Software Rating Board was tasked with assigning a rating to a video game based on its content. You had early children, everyone 10 and up, teen, mature, and adults only. This was done in 1994. How effective is this system? One study done by Pew Research Center in 2008, 14 years after the ratings were created, keep in mind, showed 50% of boys and 14% of girls aged 12 to 17 listed a game with a mature and adults only rating in their top 3 favorite games. With this info, could we assume that these ratings provided to games are even helping with keeping inappropriate games to our children? Remember, I got 4 kids. I don't want my babies to be safe. Now let's discuss a legal case against the sale of violent video games. Multiple California bills in 2005 were presented for the sole purpose of criminalizing all sales of mature and adult-only video games to minors. The general justification for these bills was that they were the silent epidemic of desensitization of violence. Finally, this argument was brought into court, known as the Brown versus the Entertainment Merchants Association case. Here, the prosecution wanted all sales of violent video games to minors restricted. Of course, like every other bill and proposal to end these sales, they were ineffective. Justice Antonin Scalia wrote a statement of the majority explaining that every connection between violent video games and harmful effects on children have been rejected in any court that will look into the case, because there is no proof. There are a lot of studies, so bear with me, please. A study of 200 children, ages 10 to 11, were interviewed about their gaming habits. 2/3 of the kids reported playing video games every day. 11% of the children played more than 3 hours a day. Those same children showed lower levels of academic engagement and higher levels of aggression than those that played less than an hour each day. Children who played less than an hour showed lower rates of aggression than children who did not play at all. So what exactly do these findings show? Prolonged gameplay, rather than daily gameplay, can show heightened aggression. So it's not necessarily the recurrent daily gaming, but more the extended one-sitting game sessions that last hours upon hours. Sales of video game hardware and software in the US increased over 200% from 1994 to 2014. During this time, violent crimes decreased by 37%, and murders by juveniles acting alone fell 76%. Over 150 million Americans, 71% of which are teens, play video games. 71 mass shootings have taken place from 1982 to the late 2015. Only 7 of these shootings involved a shooter who was 18 or younger.
Question time.
Are violent video games actually the root cause of shootings and the increased aggression towards women and other people? Or does this issue stem from other causes that we are unaware of? Are other components plausible when discussing video games and their impact on how we respond to situations ethically? Based on all of the evidence I've been able to gather from multiple studies in that major court case, the conclusion is everything linking violent video games to urges in killing or harming others is inconclusive. Content, moderation, parental guidance, and knowing your surroundings are what should be focused on. Younger children should have access to more educational content in the video games they play. Parents should take the time to discuss with their children that every waking moment should not and will not be spent playing video games. As they get older, of course parents should still be involved in what their children are playing. When I have children in a galaxy far, far away, I want them to have the same amazing experience I have had with video games, while still understanding what is important. It is just a video game. Moral responsibility and the ability to distinguish what is real and what is not will be my responsibility to teach others. In my opinion, the real problem that should be looked into is how parents are taking steps to ensure their children are ethically and morally grounded. Once that is taught to these kids, enjoying the virtual world that video games create can be that much more enjoyable. Well, that was my rant and my research. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like. If you're not subscribed, wait, this isn't YouTube. In that case, Dr. Magdi, I hope I didn't butcher your name. Don't be afraid to drop an A on this assignment. I'm Pete, aka Prominent Jester, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Happy jestering.